Okay, we are live for episode 225 of Trek Live. How we doing this morning, Dan?
Doing good. Really excited to talk some Star Trek. Every time I know it's been a little bit since we've been doing the show, obviously, but with the conclusion of Picard, I can say that officially. I'm excited to dive into more talking about more Trek at this point.
Yeah, we took a couple weeks off our like every other week alternating system. Uh, didn't line up for us to be here the week of the Picard finale, and we really wanted to do that. And we had some busy stuff going on the last couple weeks, so it all made sense to just kind of take a couple weeks off and be here today to kind of digest and think about. I think how the season ended. Think about it as a completed product. I think it's a big enough deal that it merits kind of its own discussion. So we're going to have that be our sort of topic of the day. We're going to touch on our season 4 TNG rankings too in a couple minutes. Do our traditional rewatch recap. We'll talk about what we've been watching, where we are. We're both in TNG still. And touch on where we are with that, what our last few episodes have been, overall impressions. But the bulk of today's discussion will definitely be Picard season 3. And as the thumbnail kind of notes, conversation might not even be totally over about Picard. This is the first show of the new era that is like a done, completed product. The 3 seasons of this series are in the books. And it's kind of a unique show because if you think about how Star Trek Picard is kind of structured, each season is kind of a series unto itself. And like I think the way that it's kind of been put in recent months and in the lead up to season 3 at least is you have to look at each season of Picard as sort of like a novel written by a different author with a different like kind of specific aim to explore. They're different tonally. They're about different things. There's sort of a soft reset with each of the 3 seasons to varying results depending on who you ask. And I think it'll be interesting maybe down the road a little bit, maybe once there's a little bit more time and perspective to kind of double back to Picard as a whole completed product and think about the 3 seasons. And it's a unique experiment in Star Trek's kind of run of shows. And it's the first of this currently running era that's like done in a completed product that you can kind of look at as with a beginning, middle, and an end. It's kind of a 3-act kind of structure. So, yeah, more Picard talk to come beyond today. This is just going to be looking at season 3, the last few episodes of the season as a whole, what we think now that it's done and wrapped up, and really look forward to that. But before we do that, I do want to put up. We haven't touched on at least on Trek Live here, our episode rankings for season 4. So we're going to throw them up on the screen now. They're kind of little under us on the screen, but we can put them up on Twitter as well. Let's see. We have a lot of similarities. We have the same top 3, which is, I think, to be expected. Best of Both Worlds, Drumhead, family. The 3 of them feel pretty universally critically acclaimed. No real surprise there, but there's a little difference after that. I have First Contact at 4. You have it at 7. The episode First Contact, and we have the 2 Klingon episodes, Reunion and Redemption Part 1 next, but flipped. I have Redemption ahead of Reunion. You have Reunion ahead of Redemption. Yeah. Any thoughts about like the upper tier of season 4? Like, looking at your rankings, I'm curious because you don't do episode grades, and that what I think I might start doing when we do this is like where does a line maybe exist where like the like great upper tier 1, like if we were doing a tier list, where does that first tier kind of stop? Is it just those top 3? Is it a little further down? Like, where do you kind of separate like the best of the best from the really great in season 4?
I think for me, it probably comes right around that Klingon kind of grouping that you just mentioned, like 6 or 7. I think, at least for me, that's where like the A grade, if we're gonna like split it off with a letter grade. and I think that just kind of goes into the B minus range from there. But no, I think that's there. I think every season is kind of different in TNG, where it's like, yeah, some of them where it's like you might get 10 episodes where it's like, okay, these are kind of really solid. Feel good about giving this an A ranking. But again, there's other seasons where it's like, all right, can I just find a B minus somewhere here to be in the upper tier?
Mm-hmm.
But it's no, I would say at least for this season 4, I would go around 6 or 7 as far as like these are really solid a really decent, really good outing for the season.
Yeah, I that's one of the things I was kind of curious to touch on specifically, because I remember when we talked about season 3 and we put those rankings up, you had mentioned at that point, I think you were kind of wrapping up season 4, maybe not quite done yet, and you had made a comment about season 4 feeling a little different than 3 as far as maybe how thick that upper echelon was. The season 3 is kind of notorious for Yesterday's Enterprise and The Offspring and Who Watches the Watchers, The Defector, Best of Both Worlds, Sarek, like being real thick at the top. And maybe season 4, the impression I got, at least from the conversation, was maybe season 4 isn't quite that heavy at the very, very top, and maybe that like
stick in the middle now.
Yeah. I kind of agree with that. I think when I think of season 4, I think of the strength of sort of the mid range. I have 7 A's I think on my list, so I gave it a lot of props at the very top for myself. But I think that middle rounded out portion of it is what gives season 4. I think it's, there aren't very many mixed bags for me in season 4. I feel pretty good about most of them. Even the C's are interesting and have a lot of meat on them.
Like even Suddenly Human, like that perspective on this, because of what we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the show. Yeah. I feel like it, at least for me, it kind of bumped up a little bit because it's just kind of interesting in what it kind of tackles in that episode. So
yeah,
again, that's you could call that a C, but I think it has some interesting stuff in it because of Picard season 3. So
yeah, it's yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But even that, like, how many C's are there? Like, it's a lower half, and it's just I think I would have to agree with what you said. It's like the middle is kind of heavy in the season, whereas mm-hmm. like maybe in last season, it felt really heavy at the top.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the strength of the season is the kind of consistency of it, even when it's not like pumping out like all-time classics. It's good quality, really strong Star Trek. And I think this is the point. Season 4 was where we were when Picard season 3 began. And so I think that first chunk of season 3, we were in the midst of this season. And I know we were both saying in those first handful of weeks of Picard season 3, like how much it was like symbiotic. Like season 3 was feeding into what we were watching in season 4. Season 4 was feeding into what we were watching in season 3 of Picard. Like it was so intertwined. Like the beauty of season 3 of Picard, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, is I think how it's not just pulling from like the movie First Contact and the Best of Both Worlds, which it obviously is, but it's taking from like the DNA of the show, like the meat and potatoes of the series, and I think being in that season while we were watching season 3 really helped both. It's going to be impossible to watch, like you said, with Suddenly Human. I just watched 2 at the end of season 5 yesterday and Friday night. Between the two of them, Iborg and The Inner Light, which are both great. I mean, they're both A's as far as I'm concerned, but it's impossible to watch both of those episodes now without a little extra something in your head about where Picard specifically ends up and the kinds of things he's dealing with in Picard season 3. So, TNG is kind of newly loaded with new things to, kind of like we were saying all the time with Discovery and with the original show, and how it was kind of retroactively informing old content. That certainly happened again here with Picard season 3. You have The Lost as your last episode. I have it second to last with Night Terrors. We both have the same bottom two. Same bottom four. No, actually.
In theory is
Yeah,
a
you
little
have In
bit
Theory.
lower.
You have In Theory lower than me.
Yeah.
You have. I did notice one other, like, slight. You have Identity Crisis a few spots higher.
Yeah, four up.
Yeah.
For some reason, like I feel like we've hit that. Like I just hit that, but we also watched it. I think with A Track After Dark a few times ago, and I just for some reason I feel like that's just been slowly creeping up, and really enjoying that for I
Identity
don't know
Crisis?
what. Yeah, for whatever reason, it's just been slowly, I think, gaining likeness from me. I'm not sure why. I just
It's creepy.
I think it is creepy, but I think there are some really backstory heavy episodes, and I think and not just Identity Crisis, but obviously brothers and
Yeah.
family and stuff like that. So I think whenever we get to see like maybe Geordie's past service record, I think it jumps off the page a little bit.
Sure.
As far as going up the ranks. Because we don't get to see a lot of Geordie. There's some hit and miss episodes in the season for him. So, yeah, I like Identity Crisis.
Yeah, I think season 4 is probably your mileage may vary in terms of like how successful these episodes are, but season 4 with if you're thinking Geordie like centric episodes, Galaxy's Child, which we both have pretty low on our lists, Identity Crisis, and The Mind's Eye are all very heavy Geordie stories. So he's got some stuff to do in season 4, but I think it's definitely he kind of subsides maybe a little bit in future seasons. I don't know as if he has that many Geordie centric episodes again in like an individual season. I'm thinking it's more like 2 each season that are like. I mean, he's heavy in Data stories too. He's got a lot to do. Sometimes supporting Data. He obviously carries a lot of the load with techno B plots often.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's I think a lot of the meat and potatoes Geordie backstory kind of things kind of come into play in season 4, which is kind of cool to think about. Yeah, so I think that I don't want to dwell too much on this. I really want to pivot into Picard and our kind of broader rewatch, but a lot of similarities like usual, but some subtle differences this time around that are interesting to look at. Was The Lost an easy choice last?
Yeah, I'm just not sure if, and maybe it's just my headcanon is too strong and affecting it, but I have a hard time seeing Deanna really react this way and how she would lose her power. So it's stuff.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the common knock on it, is that she maybe pivots into a territory a little quickly here, and maybe I think it's can be construed as a little out of character or a little unexpected. It's a tough sit too. It's not a pleasant 45 minutes. Night Terrors is it for me, and fairly easily I have it at a D+. The next lowest is a C with The Loss. I think I'm torn on Night Terrors a little bit. Like it's got some really kind of creepy imagery in it. There are things in it that do stick with me. Worf, getting ready to kill himself in his quarters with Deanna walking in on him, stopping him. I think it's Riker in bed with snakes under the sheets. Like there's some images in it, but it's easy to beat up on the Deanna floating in the clouds, where are you stuff, and it's rightfully so. It's really not great. It's just not for me. Not for me.
I almost think that it feels so like the same with Devil's Due. Those 2 episodes, Night Terrors and Devil's Due, feel like could be a TOS episode or like a season 1 episode where it's like a little bit on the nose and doing some interesting things.
Yeah. That's a good point. I do think Devil's Due especially. There's some really cool backstory on the production side of that. That's an old Star Trek Phase 2 spec script, like a script that was written for the proposed new show that
Well,
became
that's
the
why it
motion
feels like
picture.
TOS.
Yep. There's a script floating around out there that's got Spock in the data role having to be the judge, and Kirk having to be the and you can kind of see it like that. That's the DNA's there for TOS, and it's totally obvious. I think that it feels like a TOS kind of story, and I agree with that. Night Terrors as well feels like something that the original series would have done. So, yeah. What about where you are right now? I mean, we're both into season 5 at this point. I just finished it. Full disclosure, last night I watched Times Arrow, The Inner Light last night, or yesterday afternoonish, and last night. What about you? How close? What was the last episode you watched?
I'm getting there. I think I just watched Cause and Effect last night, which is 18.
Classic. Yeah.
So I got a handful of episodes left. That are definitely some of the ones that I'm looking forward to. Like Bill said, with Iborg and Inner Light. So yeah, it's we're coming down to kind of the last few episodes of season 5. Again, it's similar to season 4. I think there's definitely some all-time greats, but I think there are just like a really middle ground, kind of meaty middle that feels really heavy, which I'm not complaining, because I would much rather have a consistent season than kind of a run full of stinkers, which we'll definitely get to in some form or another in the coming seasons.
There are seasons
that's
that
where
are
I'm
like
at.
That, yeah. No, I totally agree. I think season 5 is very strong. One of my favorite seasons of Star Trek because of that. That just easygoing, middle of the pack, consistently grinding out, good strong Star Trek. Yeah, it's comfortable. It's using all of the characters. They're using different genres. There's horror, there's romance, there's drama, there's comedy. Like they kind of mix it all in. Use the cast in interesting ways. Allegorical kinds of stories. Classic Star Trek kinds of big science fiction ideas. Like it's all there. They're not all timers. There are a handful that are. But it's just really consistently chugging along, and I think there are very few stinkers. There's some that don't work great for me that I would put in like that C category. I respect them more than I like them. I like talking about them maybe more than I like watching them. There's cool things to think about and unpack, but they're not entirely satisfying to me. That's how I would define like an episode that I would give a C. So there's a handful of them, C plus ish. But very few real kind of bombs, and it's we'll definitely do that maybe in a couple weeks. If you're pretty close to the end, I'm sure by the time we're here again, you'll probably be wrapped up with season 5, and maybe we'll do the same thing before we pivot into our kind of topic of the week in our next episode, and kind of put those rankings up and think about it as a whole, and see how close we are and where our differences lie and all the cool things. So. All right, let's get into Picard, season 3. The last time we were here, I think the episodes that we talked about were 6 and 7. So we've been gone for a few weeks, with 8, 9, and 10 having just aired. How do you feel about the way it wrapped up? There's a lot that happens in 9 and 10, especially with kind of pulling the rug out from under the story, and there's some misdirection that gets unraveled, and like a lot of the mystery that is sort of pulling us through the first 7, 8 episodes gets revealed, like what's up with Jack, who's behind the curtain. And I feel like the conversation between episodes 9 and 10, there was a lot of there were mixed feelings, understandably, I think, about what they did. I think I'm interested to hear. I suspect I know what you're going to say. I think I know, but I want to hear you. I want to hear what you think. Like, what did you think as the mystery was sort of being unraveled and the door opens, and that the season kind of solidifies as far as like what are we doing, and then 9 and 10 become about resolving it? Like, what did you think about where things ended up in terms of what we were doing?
A little bit of an eye roll, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I'm just like, the Borg again. Like, I don't know. We all these modern shows, like, there's been like potential to do this, to go back to do the Borg thing. I know there was some like early discussions I remember having with Discovery. Like, are they going to go with, this is going to be the beginning of
season
the Borg?
2. And we really didn't want them to.
And we really didn't want them to. And then it's just like, and it just, that's the way the Picard went. And I think like first gut reaction, it was the eye roll thing. But when you really think about it, that's really the staple of this character and the staple of this show. Like so as much as I knock like another Borg centric kind of conclusion, it's just, that's the nature of the beast a little bit. This is the show, and it's not all bad. Like I gotta really pump up and really positive, like how they brought the cast together, like throughout the season. Like I really enjoyed it. It wasn't from the beat was like they're just back on the ship again. They earn it, and they slowly come back together, and it's really good stuff. And I think I don't know, I was just worried that there wasn't going to be a great payoff with the Jack situation, which I was just kind of not really on board with to begin with, and I slowly came around, and I think that was kind of a very satisfying ending. They just did really good dramatic stuff, and you can knock it for it just being another Borg centric episode or kind of season, but that's the Next Generation, and that's this cast. So it's hard because like I really did enjoy what they did with the Changelings, and I really liked them just feeling I don't know, away from just they
that felt fresh.
That felt fresh because it was like, okay, we'd seen Changelings before, but they're not part of the Great Link. They're just like separate entity, and it feels interesting. But like this is a kind of created entity because of what Starfleet did. So it's like it felt fresh and new. And but in typical Star Trek fashion, there's always got to be a man behind the curtain, or this in this case, a queen behind the curtain. I thought it was it's satisfying. There was a little bit of eye roll for the first gut reaction.
You're not alone. I mean, there's a lot of people who
were
reticent about that. I was pretty quickly okay with it because I think the thing that I think invites people to be like, really, is season 1 had the Borg kind of involved to some extent with the XBs, the sort of disconnected artifacts, Borg cube. But if you you really don't deal with the Borg per se. Like you're dealing with a Borg ship, and they're very kind of peripherally in the season. Like it's a part of the story, but it's not a Borg threat. Like they're not there's no like conflict with the Borg in season 1. Season 2, the Borg Queen is there, like a version of the Borg Queen. It's in this alternate timeline, and they do really interesting. Like as we've said a few times when we talk about season 2 of Picard, like some of my favorite things in that season are involving that. I think they do find new and interesting things.
That feels fresh.
Felt fresh. I really did think that was good. I thought they dealt with what it's like to be assimilated, which I think they actually weave into this a little bit with why Jack doesn't want to come out of it. I think they kind of pick up some of the threads from season 2, like that joyous like rush of endorphins that comes from being part of the collective is part of why he doesn't want to come out of it. Like that's what he has to break out of. So I appreciated that, but season 2 deals a lot with Borg stuff, obviously, but it's again not the Borg Queen in our universe, in our like the TNG timeline. Coming back to reckon with what's happened. This is sort of like the direct line from First Contact Endgame to here. Like, there's consequences from what Janeway did to the Borg at the end of Voyager. I appreciate, because even with seeing the Borg in season 1 of Picard, and to a lesser degree season 2, because that kind of gets into the parallel universe kind of a terrain. Like, the hanging question over the Borg ever since Endgame is like, well, like what's up? Like, Janeway did a number on them. Like, the impression that you get at the end of Endgame is she effed them up bad, and we never really see that. And until now, like, we get a picture, like whatever ship that happened on. That's my impression of. I haven't watched Endgame in a little bit, but is that the same Borg cube that Admiral Janeway's on with the Borg Queen in Endgame, and that's the same Borg crew that she's cannibalizing to keep herself alive so that she can do what she's doing here? Like, to me, if that's the case, that's cool. I'm in for that, and seeing that torch get picked up and paid off finally. And given what this season's thematically about, like, I'm not a father like you are, but like the sort of like, what do you want to leave your kid? Like, what traits do you want to pass along, and what traits do you not want to pass along? And the thing that Picard would not want to pass along in any way is anything involving that experience that he had. And this is the thing in his past that is haunting him, right? And the part of himself that he hates and would want to separate from any future version of himself. And to me, that, like, what else would it be? If that's the story you're telling, then that, yeah, I mean, to me, like, any frustration with the Borg again kind of comes from, like, we toyed with the Borg for the last few seasons of this, and we kind of just effed around and didn't do the thing, and now we're actually doing the thing, and we're kind of paying for the sins of the last couple seasons for kind of screwing around with it.
Yeah.
Like, if those seasons would have done it and paid off these things, then this opportunity wouldn't be here, and it wouldn't feel so redundant in season 3, like, to do the thing. Like, this, to me, it feels right that that's what it ends with, especially knowing what the theme of the story is. So my frustration lies more with the other seasons than with this one, because I don't know what else it would be. I think Bill Smith from Trek Geeks tweeted at one point, like there were all these theories that people had. I think you even mentioned, because of the red eyes, the Pa Wraiths, and the Dominion, and all these things, that it could be like, it wasn't going to be. No, yeah. It's the Borg. The Borg are relentless. The Borg will never stop. They're never going to stop. They're obsessed. They're driven. Picard is in their crosshairs, and they're not going to stop. And it was going to be that. It just was. And I'm good with it. I think they handled it well. I think the things that they did in episode 10. Like I said, to sort of pick the ball up from season 2 with the experience of being assimilated. I think there are some meta. I think there are really cool ways to look at the scenes with Picard talking to his son, trying to bring him out of, like, he's trying to bring his son out of being assimilated and being a Borg and living in the collective, but it's a father trying to bring his son out of fill in the blank. Like, it can be anything that, like, a young adult son who's struggling might be dealing with in this world. I mean, there are a lot of people who could find a lot of potency in that scene. And I think that's really well done in true Star Trek fashion. Like, yeah, it's a science fiction conceit that we're seeing this play out with, but it's a father and a son trying to save his son. And reckoning with their own choices and things that they did and things that they could control and they couldn't control, and all these factors kind of playing in. I think that's really, really well done and pays off the season really well. And, Picard is a character who's constantly dealing with, he says at the beginning of the season, I'm not a person who cares about legacy, but throughout TNG, he cares a lot about legacy. I mean, one of his big hang-ups is that he doesn't have a family. There's not going to be a next generation. He talks about it in Generations when his brother and his nephew die, that there's going to be no more Picards, and that's a major problem for him. That's a major struggle for him. So this is something that's been hanging over him for a long time, and seeing that get explored and talked about, and him having to deal with the consequence of that is really satisfying for me as somebody who loves that character. And yeah,
And there were so many great breadcrumbs that we just, at least I didn't see. Shaw, he was
Yeah,
there.
right.
Wolf
Yeah,
359.
yeah, yeah.
How the whole fleet gets networked. Shout out Battlestar Galactica. Like that's
Yeah, right.
just that's like a completely Borg theme.
Right.
That's just like
It's
everything
all
was
there.
right there.
It's right.
And then once you see it, it's just like cascades, and you're like, oh, well, this makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so good because like I feel like it's such a like I it's just so well done and well beautifully written because I feel like it is a love letter to like the 90s era of TNG. Much
Oh yeah.
Again, like we started at the top of the season saying like top of the show, not this show, but top of Picard being like, okay, we don't want a reunion show, and then we do, and then just.
But see, to me, like a lot of people, I know people are saying, why couldn't they just do this from the beginning? But it was more sad to me. It was more satisfying because it was the long build up to it and having to live with. Are they going to do it? How are they going to do it? Are we going to see these characters again? Like the long sort of drawn out question of that being paid off with seeing them together at the end of 8 and then where they're together at the end of 9. Like, come on. Like that, the emotional impact of that is so much greater because it's drawn out and it's not that they didn't just do it in season 1 or do it right out of the gate. And it's not just all good things, seeing them together again at, later in life. Like this takes a different path and it takes a while to get there, but it does. And that makes it more satisfying. And to me, what you said, that's sort of the real victory of the season, I think, is how well earned bringing these characters together again is. And how, I like as a whole, I think the TNG movies are a mixed bag. I love First Contact. I have a lot of nostalgia and some positive feelings for Generations, but those movies just were not equipped to give all 7 of these characters something to do. They just weren't structurally built to do that. They were Picard stories where Data would traditionally get a B story of some sort that he kind of carries, and everybody else is very much a supporting player. First Contact does the best job, I think, of trying to give more of them things to do, and everybody kind of gets a scene to varying degrees. But seeing, like, when I think back to this over the last 10 weeks, every single one of them, the actor who plays them is as good as they've ever been. They're all great. And they get big, important, dramatic, important things to do to the story. They're all needed. Like they all do things that are important to the story and important to solving the problem. They all have weight in the progression of the story. And that's the real victory of it. Seeing it's not just Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner. It's Frakes. It's Michael Dorn. It's Gates McFadden. Like they're all so effing good and have big things. And I'm unbelievably thankful that they were able to do that because the TNG movies just never were. And what that did was it didn't give the Next Generation show Beyond All Good Things like that satisfying, wrap up, like that big ending that felt like it served all of the characters. And what made that, because what TNG is as a series is an ensemble, as we were just talking about. Like you get into the meat and potatoes of the series, season 4, season 5, it's bouncing around. It's a Crusher episode, it's a Worf episode, it's a Troy episode, it's a Riker episode. They all have a big stake in the ensemble, and they all get to carry episodes and in different kinds of stories, and they're all kind of equal parts, and people have their favorites, and certainly Picard is the lead, but they're all such integral parts of that show, and they all have a kind of an equal stake in it. And they just weren't able to do that in the movies, and this was. And that's why this is so great that it exists, I think.
Bill always asks, what's the MVP of each of these episodes?
Every week
like,
I always ask
the last 3 episodes,
you can't
pick an MVP. And
No.
that's the beauty of this and that's the beauty of this season is like I don't even know if it's a traditional reunion. It's not the same old characters in the same old places. These characters have changed.
Yeah.
They're in different Crusher's firing the phasers for crying out loud. It's just
very
like,
well.
It's very well. And she's just so good. And all of these characters are in different places and change so much. Like it's, I guess a credit to Bill because he, from the very beginning, it's like, okay, what I want and what they're doing is taking dramatic leaps and bounds in these characters because it's been 35 years, and so it's just it's really good. It's not just a reunion show. It's not just same old characters, same old places.
Nothing's changed. Same old just things. A little older, more wrinkles, same person.
Yeah, that's not the case.
No, they're the same but different. They're radically different. They've lived lives separate from each other and had experiences that are unique, and that's again what makes it satisfying. Like, we're not just seeing them thrown together and they just get along. Like, Geordi comes back, like we see Geordi for the first time and he's pissed, and he's got conflict with Picard, and he's got his own concerns now. He's a family man and he has different priorities and he's at a different place in life, and to get to where he is at the end takes time and circumstance, and it's evolution needs to happen. And what they did with Data, like, to me, like, that's the one thing that they were able to, even more than like I think everybody, it's easy because, like you said, it's so in the DNA of TNG, like the involvement of the Borg in some way. Like, that's not a huge surprise. Like, that's that people, I think, were kind of on their toes, kind of ready for that at some point to rear its head. But the thing that I was genuinely really, really surprised by, because of their ability to kind of keep a secret, was the fact that Brent Spiner was playing Data, like, and satisfyingly so. I'm glad that they kept that a secret, because I think if they would have revealed that in any way through the promotional materials, through the trailers, our eyes would have rolled to the back of our heads. Like, we did this, like, he's dead, like, leave him alone. But I think because of the reveal of how he is what he is and what they did to make that happen, and the way to get him to the point where he could be prominently Data, is really satisfying, and only could be is only going to be appreciated if experienced as it plays out. I'm really grateful that they kept that a surprise, because that's one of the few things this season that when it happened, I was really like jaw on the floor, like, I can't believe they're doing that. Like, and then that they made me believe that he was playing lore, like, and he does for a portion of it. And he's even through all the end, like, he's partially lore. I mean, it's kind of just in line with everything this season's about, with, like, what do you leave your next generation? I mean, this character that Brent Spiner's playing is bits and pieces of all the Soong stuff all thrown into one, like a child is. He's got DNA from Data and Lore and Lal and the Soongs and all that in him. And especially by episode 6, when all that's kind of clear that that's what the season's about. When you learn that's what Brent Spiner's there to do, it's like, wow, that's freaking perfect. And I'm so glad that I discovered it in the context of the show, and not, through an interview or a leak or a trailer. Because I would have been on the defensive if I knew that he was playing a version of Data. I would have been like, come on. But
they kept a good number of secrets this season. Big secrets that I feel like had easily been easily been leaked, I think.
Sure.
But they did a fantastic job.
They did.
Yeah.
The big thing, obviously, in these last couple episodes is the recreation of the Enterprise D, the ship and the bridge, the physical set of the bridge, which is beyond gorgeous. I think I said to you a few weeks ago, I kind of called this to you a little bit, sort of.
You did, yeah.
I'm not alone in any means. Like, people kind of clocked this when we were at the Starship Museum, and things were being said that were like,
they tipped their hand a little bit with the
Hangar
Geordi.
12, and there's something in there, and by that point you learn, like, they're really emphasizing, like, these ships are all interconnected. They talk to each other. That's why they're being tailed so effectively. Every time they warp out of, they come out of warp, it seems like there's a Starfleet ship on top of them. So they needed to get to something that was off the network, and so I felt like it was going that way. But seeing the recreation of the bridge is quite a moment for sure, and kind of, I think, bound to go down as like an all-timer in the way that, like, Trials and Tribulations was back in the 90s. In a Mirror Darkly felt that way when that aired. Like, the recreation of the TOS bridge felt like a really big deal. But this, getting to see those characters sit in those chairs and take those stations again was a major highlight, and is bound, like I said, to I think go down as like an all-timer kind of Star Trek moment. Dan's frozen, which we kind of expected might happen. I'll keep the conversation going. Hopefully, he'll pop back in a second here. But yeah, I think the recreation of that bridge set with the help of, I think the bringing back of folks like the Okudas and Doug Drexler and Dan Curry, people that worked on The Next Generation, which we've known about for a long time, makes all the more sense now. Having people like that, on staff, I'm sure, to help with getting the details right and making sure that it was meticulously done and taken care of, certainly paid off and felt like a major victory for the season, and is obviously going to be talked about for a very, very long time as a successful piece of season 3 and of the series as a whole. So, yeah, I definitely think this is, to sum this up in case Dan doesn't come back, and we're coming up on an hour anyway. This is certainly my favorite season of Picard as a whole. I think this is the best the show has been. I think episodes like No Win Scenario and the finale, Imposters and the Bounty, are real standouts and some of the best of this current era of Trek in the 2017 onward run of new Star Trek. I'm not the kind of person that is a big naysayer of the first 2 seasons, and Dan's back. But while I'm not a naysayer for the first 2 seasons, I think they both have positives and nice things that they bring to the table. Things that I really enjoy. This is by far my favorite season of the 3. I don't know if you would agree with me on that, but this is I think the most successful that Picard has been of the 3 seasons, especially. And it's easy to do that because of, like we said at the beginning of this show, how different each of the 3 seasons are. They are so distinctive from each other that I think it's kind of easy to look at them as their own separate entities and have preferences and not. But this has been a real treat. As somebody who grew up with The Next Generation, and that it's very much in my DNA. It's still, I mean, it's the thing of the new of everything that's happened since 2017 with it coming back in the run of all the seasons and the shows. It's the thing that I still like kind of pinch myself, and I'm like, I can't believe they actually did that. That they were able to, and a lot of things had to come together. I mean, they're very fortunate that, unlike some of these other casts, Deep Space Nine notably, the cast is alive and well and equipped to come back and do what they did and be as great as they were. They're fortunate. A lot of stars had to align for them to be able to do this and do it now. And the fact that they were able to do it is a real gift to anybody that I think has strong feelings about The Next Generation. And I think it goes beyond nostalgia. There's a lot of talk about, is it just nostalgia porn? Is it just kind of playing on your emotions and kind of manipulating the audience with those kinds of things? And I would argue no. I think the story is about how the characters have changed and what's new. And yes, there are looks back, and they do tweak those things, but it's not living and dying on just sitting around a table and talking about the old days. I mean, it's urgent and new, and about how these characters have changed and how they're different, like we've kind of touched on already in this conversation. So I would refute that, and it's definitely my favorite season of the 3. What about you? Would you agree with that? Would you?
Yeah, but I feel like by a mile. I think
By a mile.
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite season, and it does not. And it's not just it doesn't do. It's not just this original cast. There's other
Yes.
characters.
Oh yeah.
That it's like I can't believe like you said, pinch me. Like 7 of 9 is the captain on the bird. Like it's just like
Captain of the Enterprise.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like that even is canon now.
Mm-hmm.
That's just such a great just arc. Even in Picard, 7's arc in Picard, it's just like it's
satisfying,
incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And it just begs the question: like when she was with the Rangers, was it like was the the changelings even there then, like trying to, and that's why she didn't get along with Starfleet at the end. It's just like trying to keep her out. I don't know, because I don't know. That's a great headcanon question. I think. It'd be fun.
Oh, that's a really good.
Yeah.
Like, how long have the changelings been meddling, and how aggressively so? Like, that's going to be an open question, I think, for a long time.
Yeah.
Especially when you think back to season 1 with how Starfleet's kind of gone awry there too. There are a lot of parallels between seasons 1 and 2, with Starfleet kind of being manipulated in a negative direction. In season 1, it's sort of this Romulan subterfuge kind of driving it, but the changeling's kind of part of that too, kind of like playing it up and making it easier for that to happen. I think there are a lot of questions to be asked and explored that for a long time with that. And people who enjoy the headcanon game will have a lot of fun trying to chart all that out. But I totally echo everything you said. I think that it's not just the old characters. It's not just TNG. And it's tempting to kind of focus on that. I just did it. I kind of harped on that, and because that's so prominent for me. But, obviously Jerry Ryan too. Michelle Hurd, I think, is her best self in this season. I think it's been the best treatment of that character, and her performance is as good as she's ever been. Ed Speleers as Jack Crusher is fantastic. I think they really nailed that.
He's really good.
Yeah, very, very good find. Great casting. Todd Stashwick as Captain Shaw throughout the season was phenomenal. It was just a great character.
Again, one of those characters where I'm like, why only one season?
Yeah.
Why only one season? Like Hammer last year. Like they've done this a million times since 2017. So it's just so good.
Yeah, Ashley Sharp Chestnut as Sidney LaForge, I think, is fantastic too. Like they really nailed the casting this year. I think the supporting players, the young characters, the bridge crew that were kind of along for the ride the whole time. Because if you think about it, a lot of people were kind of talking about this as the season went out along. It's really old school Star Trek in the sense that they're on the ship a lot. It's really just on the Titan set pretty consistently throughout it. A little bit on the Talus.
Season almost.
Yeah, it's really a bottle season. Yeah. It's really just on those standing sets for a lot of the time. And I saw some people kind of him and haw about that a little bit. It's one of those. Go ahead.
That was 90s air. I feel like that's 1992 and Nutshell. I just watched, just going through season. Like it's such a.
They're always on the sets. Yeah.
Yeah, it's especially when you're in that Starfleet, Star Trek realm. I feel like it's just like you're always on the ship.
Yeah, and in season 2, people complain that they're in LA for too long and they're not in space, and now they're in space the whole time. People complain about that. So, some people you just can't please. But I had no problem with that. I agree with you. I think it felt retro and just like the Next Generation, especially like relying on those standing sets. But because of that, characters like the bridge crew, the young characters there, the sort of supporting players get a lot of time and are just kind of there and get to contribute a lot and get to shine with little material, but still kind of shine through. I appreciated all of them as well. Amanda Plummer as Vatic. I think whenever she was on screen, she was really strong. It's been a really great season. I think with great casting for new characters and giving all the returning faces big important things to do. The ending of the season reminded me a lot of the end of season 2 of Discovery, with sort of this parallel kind of fork in the road. We have Discovery. It's at the end of that episode. It's really like we have to the left the red signal of Discovery in the future kind of shining through, and the Enterprise warping off to go do Strange New Worlds, basically. So you have kind of 2 parallel endings leading to 2 different places. With this, you have the TNG crew in the bar having their last kind of scene, but you also have the Enterprise G, formerly the Titan, with Captain Seven and Rafi and Jack Crusher, Sidney LaForge, off going on a shakedown cruise and seemingly off to new adventures. Do you want Star Trek Legacy the way people keep talking about it? Like, is that something? Like, is that goes down.
I honestly can see it both ways. Like to me, initially, it was like, okay, because he is a Picard, that's what comes with this like, for lack of a better word, the legacy, and that's what it comes with. Like the Q is just like a package deal with being part of that family and part of that story. So I can definitely see it being an ending here, or I can see, you could talk yourself into anything really. I thought that it was the Starfleet Academy pitch initially, but I could see like, I don't know, cadets being serviced here, and that's really the Starfleet Academy type of show here,
right?
So I'm just not sure, and at least seeing on Twitter, I don't know if there's like an official, thing similar to,
Pike and the old
Strange New Worlds, and like I don't know if there's enough buzz.
Oh, I think there is
with this. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. I could see both ways. I could see just letting it go, or I could see, again, casting is already pretty much done. Obviously, they're gonna add a few here and there.
Sure.
Bridge, the set's built already, money spent. So it's just, I guess, initially just trying. Not all the money spent, but some money has already been spent. But again, this may be a discussion for another day. But I worry about just budgetary, political stuff with Paramount Plus. In state of TV right now, with adding another show.
Right.
But who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, all things being equal, I would love for them to be able to continue with Captain Seven, and like, of course, I would watch that and be really excited by it if they.
I'm never gonna go against more Star Trek. It's like I don't want more Star Trek. No, I would rather have 10 shows.
Right, right. You and me both. But I think they ended it in a satisfying way, and if we don't do it again, I would feel a little empty. I think the promise of seeing Captain Seven, like I think because 7 of 9 is so inherently, in our DNA as like an all-timer great Star Trek character, like seeing her get to do that feels really exciting. But it does also feel like the culmination of an arc, like that. I don't know that, I don't want to sit here and say we don't need to see it. Of course I want to see it. But if they aren't able to do it, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, it's ruined. They screwed the pooch. Like, I feel like I want it. Yes, 100%. I'm rooting for it. I'm all for it. I think they would crush it. I think that would be a great show. The way Terry Matalas talks about it being, yes, adventures on the Enterprise G now. They would say the Titan until 3 days ago. But by setting it there at that time, it opens the door for picking up on threads, picking up on characters from that juicy time of 90s Trek that is still sitting here, like the DS9, the Voyager, the TNG, the ease of which TNG Picard season 3 was able to pull characters like Ro and Shelby and Tuvok and bring them into the fold for little things like that. A Star Trek Legacy could continue to do that and incorporate in guest and recurring fashions different elements of things we've seen over that 21 seasons of Star Trek across those 3 shows, as well as Picard 1, 2, and 3. And I think that's really appealing to me. Just as somebody who grew up with that timeline, like that part of Star Trek history being so integrated into my childhood, of course I want that. Like that's my home base Star Trek, like that timeline, that part of the timeline. So I would love to see it. But I agree with you, the current state of streaming doesn't seem to lend itself to endless Star Trek. But yeah, go ahead.
But the beauty of it in this point in the proverbial like Star Trek sandbox. It's like the characters are there, but the timeline after that, there's nothing really.
Yeah, for sure.
It's wide open, and I
Wide
think
open.
that's appealing to me, is because like a lot of these shows have been kind of put in sort of a box where it's like, okay, you're in this time frame and this era, and I think that's it's hard to walk away from this era because of
the openness.
You know, the openness of the characters, like you said, are really established and could kind of pop in here and there, but it's kind of wide open till, you know, Discovery and a lot further ahead now. But yeah, I really think it would be, and now here I'm talking myself into it. Kind of a great opportunity to really have just really wide open, do new stuff, but like it's almost like, pun intended, best of both worlds.
100%.
Best of both worlds, where it's like it's the universe is wide open with what you can do and who you can kind of interact with, but you still have these great characters.
Yeah, I mean, if I could have my complete wish, it would be, since Discovery's going away and Starfleet Academy's coming, you know, replace Discovery with Starfleet Academy, replace Picard with Legacy, and off we go. And that's our next 5 years or whatever. Let Lower Decks run forever, as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, Prodigy, same thing. Like, you know, let it go for as long as they want to keep that rolling. And Strange New Worlds, of course. That group of 5 shows feels kind of right to me. But 5 shows feels like a heavy lift right now.
Yeah,
with the way
it does.
Streaming is going.
Yeah, and it's tough because also isn't technically Prodigy in that same time frame?
Prodigy is like, I'm kind of fuzzy on the exact. Other people are better with like the year that it takes place in, but Lower Decks is like very shortly after Nemesis, like kind of fresh out of the gate of Nemesis. Prodigy's a little further along. I want to say maybe 10 years beyond that, and might be about 10 years ahead of Picard season 1. So they're kind of like, they each have a little runway of their own kind of before they hit up against events of the other show, if that makes sense. But what you were saying earlier about, you know, Picard kind of having that, and what Legacy would have, that kind of open runway of endless, like not running into anything that's coming, the way that Lower Decks and Prodigy kind of have. Discovery had, certainly in the first 2 seasons, and Strange New Worlds does. They kind of have like this artificial kind of boundary around them with like, you can do this, but you can't do that. And you know, Picard season 3 and Legacy, if they were to do it, would certainly have the opportunity to kind of open the sandbox completely up. So that's really appealing. We'll see. I mean, I do think the buzz is there. I think almost every day it seems like I see Star Trek Legacy trending, and it seems like there's a lot of conversation about it over the last few days.
Really great fan art as well that's been
gosh,
generated as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of passion behind it. I think the critical and wide-ranging acclaim that this season has garnered has been unlike what we've seen in the past. I think it's pretty universally beloved this season of Picard. I think a lot of eyes were on it. This is a new phenomenon, but Nielsen began tracking for like ratings purposes, streaming stuff. They were able to, I guess, crack a code. I'm not a buff of this stuff. I don't understand any of it, but Star Trek Picard for the first time was in the top 10 in the Nielsen streaming data. And that was through episode 4. That was up through No Win Scenario. So, you know,
that might be a discussion for another day as well. Take that with a grain of salt, because like my family will share one account.
Oh, so sure, me too.
It's hard to really. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very difficult to get a grasp on that kind of data and how accurate it is. But the important thing, I think, is in publications like Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, they publish this stuff, and that puts Star Trek Picard in the same kind of conversation as like the most successful of the shows in that sort of space, the streaming TV kind of world. So it's seen as a success, I would imagine, from Paramount's standpoint. So that gives it a chance. I think that certainly gives it a fighting chance to get picked up in some way and continued So we'll see. It's going to be. I mean, remember, Strange New Worlds didn't get announced until well over a year after season 2 of Discovery ended. We were sitting here talking about, are they going to do it? Are they going to do it? When's it going to happen? Are they going to do it? Are they not going to do it? Like, there was months and months and months of speculating and hoping and assuming, and they got to do it, right? They wouldn't not do it. Of course they're going to do it. But a lot of time spent between, seeing it on screen and actually getting word that they were going to actually do it. So we'll see. But that's also, to me, like a positive sign too. Like, there's a precedent for this, that they have responded to sort of what the discussion and where the passion has been. Like, season 2 of Discovery certainly created Strange New Worlds. Like, the reaction to Anson Mount and Ethan Peck and the Enterprise and the prospect of that is why that show happened. And like, so they're not allergic to being driven by those kinds of things. So we shall see. We got a long way to go on that. We have a couple months off of New Trek. It'll be back in June with Strange New World Season 2. Trailer dropped for that. You
15th,
can find that.
there, right?
Yep, June 15th. Yep. So just about 7 or 8 weeks, which I think actually feels right. I'm usually all for, like, keep the calendar rolling, but I think giving this as a completed product, as big as this was, as, I think maybe a respectful little distance for Picard ending as a series feels right, giving everybody a little time to digest this and celebrate it before we, jump right into something new. Feels like the move. I wish it was maybe a little shorter than 7 weeks, of course, just because
I also feel like it helps Discovery production timeline as well.
Yeah, kick it out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, gives them a chance to fix whatever they need to fix. So June 15th, Strange New World Season 2 kicks off, and then we'll be off with, I think, a pretty long run of new stuff. If you play with the calendar and you count out 10 weeks, from June 15th down, 10 weeks is right around the time Lower Decks premieres every year. It seems like the mid to late August. I think that's probably a safe bet. And then that takes you right into November, which would align real well with what that little poster art says about when Prodigy's coming back. So I think we might be looking at 30 straight weeks, maybe even more, maybe a week, maybe a little bit in between, who knows. But if you play with the calendar, you can easily talk yourself into at least 30 straight weeks of Trek starting in June. So exciting times ahead. But I think that'll about do it for us. Any last thoughts on? No.
Nope. Really enjoyed Picard season 3, and I feel like it's honestly perfect timing for me, at least. A little bit of like housekeeping stuff. I think Bill's gonna jump into Discovery or Deep Space Nine season pretty soon. I will be sticking with TNG strictly.
Sure.
So we're gonna branch off a little bit, but I think we're still gonna do some good recaps, some good rankings. So it should be fun.
Mm-hmm. It might help out actually because I'm still watching TNG. It'll just like I people who follow me and my rewatches on Twitter would know that I tend to use the air date thing. So I'll watch an episode of DS9 and then an episode of TNG, and kind of go with the calendar that produced the airing of the episodes. So it'll slow me down a little bit, and maybe we won't be
as far away
10, 12, 15 episodes apart anymore.
Yep.
So we'll see how that rolls in the next few weeks. I may start season 6 of TNG today, to be honest with you, because I'm itching. I said on Twitter that there's a definite correlation between feeling really, really enthused about new Star Trek and just like my general like good vibes about Star Trek in general. Like getting the high of the end of this season makes me want to watch Star Trek a lot. It's definitely driving me towards that. So more than usual. That's maybe not terribly surprising, but all right. I think that'll about do it. We'll be back in 2 weeks for more Trek Live. Not sure what the topic will be. We'll have to figure that out. But more good stuff ahead as we keep chugging along. And check us out on Twitter. Our hashtags are our ats are in the description below, and you can DM me on Twitter if you'd like to join the Trek Live Discord server, where we share what we're watching, what we're reading, There's a channel for gaming, discussion about the new stuff. It's a cool place to hang out if you're not looking for a ginormous Discord server where there's a million people and conversations that you can't keep up with. It's fairly modest. It's very positive. It's welcoming. It's populated generally with people who are pretty enthusiastic or at least open-minded about new Star Trek. So if you like Picard, if you like Discovery, Strange New Worlds, etc., it's a nice place to be with people who feel the same way, and you can get to know people. And we have occasional hangouts that we'll do. We call them Trek After Darks. I think you mentioned it earlier, which we should try to do soon. I think it's been a while since we did one, where we'll hang out and just kind of interact with the community in a casual setting. We'll watch episodes, do trivia, just kind of shoot the what about all things Star Trek and beyond. So if you're interested in joining that, you can DM me on Twitter, TrekFan4387, and I'll certainly get you on board and give you a tutorial on Discord if you need it.
Yep. Echo what Bill said. It's really good to be back. I'll thank everybody for watching. See you in a couple weeks.
Take care, everybody.